Oh, fancy. Okay, folks, welcome to the Economic Alliance Snohomish County Coffee Chat. And you all know the drill as you're trickling in now. If you happen to have a little bit of coffee or water or whatever your choice of morning drink is, feel free to hold it up or take a sip. All right. Folks, I'm Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance Snohomish County, and I have the distinct pleasure to welcome you all into this conversation about workforce. So without further ado, we do have some housekeeping items that we like to make sure that everyone is tracking. Number one, make sure you add your organization to your name so that we know who you are when you ask questions or make comments. And then number two, engage. Please join the conversation. We need your thoughts and questions as our panelists make comments and statements that are poignant. We want to hear your thoughts and comments as well. Now, with that being said, I think we are ready to hit the ground rolling. So today's coffee chat conversation will be led by none other than our director of the Snohomish STEM Network, Angie Sievers, who is actually at the top of my screen, and now she is queued on your screen. The Snohomish STEM Network, in partnership with EASC, convenes to connect business, education, early learning, government, and community-based organizations to build capacity for our future workforce, which is seminal and important. So without further ado, Angie is going to be the moderator for today. And Angie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Gary. We're really grateful for the opportunity to discuss a topic that directly impacts our quality of life today and our local workforce for tomorrow. Our panelists today bring various perspectives and experiences to support our collective understanding and community around workplace, around education, and specifically early education and childcare. So I'm hoping that we all walk away inspired by comment, fueled by statistic. I promise there won't be a plethora, but a few that are real key takeaways. And that we're all called to continue understanding what each of us can do to improve the quality, capacity, and access to meaningful quality early learning close to home and the workplace. So I'm gonna, before I introduce our panelists, I'm just gonna kind of seat this in a few, just a key spot. I wanna spotlight a few things that where we existed pre-pandemic, what happened through pandemic, and where we are now. Pre-pandemic, we didn't nearly meet the demand for early childcare and early learning in Snohomish County. During the pandemic, we lost the capacity of about 20% of our childcare capacity in Snohomish County. I'm gonna just caveat this with today's conversation. When we say early learning or childcare, we're talking about 0 to 6. So before children go to kindergarten. Childcare, and we'll get into this a little bit with our panelists, childcare meaning just basic childcare, but we're really centered around early learning, providing relevant activities that support neurocognitive, socio-emotional, and adaptive intelligence development, among others, throughout with parents and also in childcare. So we can see the capacity of early learning by county and by zip code in a DCYF dashboard that's really outlined well in our State of the Children report for the Northwest region. And we've included a Snohomish County one-page summary in the final page. And I think Katie is going to drop a link to that in the chat. And she also has just a quick visual of what it looks like up on your screen. And our huge thanks to Washington STEM in partnership with DCYF and others to make this really relevant for our community here in Snohomish County. So as K-12 returns students to school, the importance of rebuilding early learning capacity couldn't be more important for all of us as we return to work, for both employees and employers to show flexibility in work schedules, increasing ability to access talent. So as a STEM network director and a Career Connected Washington Regional Coordinating co-director for the county, we serve about 120,000 K-12 students where we're called by industry to support attracting diverse talent to the workplace. And often the very talent, be it a second parent, single mother and such, that struggles to access the invaluable community resource that we're here to talk about today. So research tells us the importance of early learning through formal learning programs, support interactions of parents in developing that neuroconnectivity that are foundational for future ability. It reduces dependence on social support services over time and develops an individual that will contribute back to community and society. So just kind of one final stop here. I have a few statistics that are pretty enlightening. In Snohomish County, we have just under 64,000 children under the age of 6. 64,000, quite a few. 60% or so of those, 38,000 young children, 0 to 6, have all parents in the workforce. And 57% of that total group does not have access to early learning. And 24% are living in poverty. So you start understanding the barriers that exist. Data is data, it doesn't tell the story. When you hear a mother talk about how she wants to go back to work and can't, and the industry is saying, we want more women in the workplace in STEM careers. We want this diversity. These are the barriers that are keeping some of this talent from returning to work. So in Snohomish County, I'm going to give you a couple of kindergarten readiness statistics. So just sit with me here. Why is early learning important? 67% of our students are kindergarten math ready in Snohomish County. For low-income students, I'm going to kind of take you through a short path. Students have greater barriers to access quality early learning. 50% are math ready in kindergarten, and they can't catch up. In third grade, 43% are at math grade level. Fast forward a bit, 40% enroll in a post-high school credential program, and only 21% achieve a credential. So what I'm sharing with you is that when we start early in high quality early learning, we set our entire community up for greater potential down the road. Nearly 50% of K-12 students in Snohomish County qualify for free and reduced lunch, amplifying our need to support this important time in their lives to get them on track. So all of this information is cited in our STEM by the numbers Snohomish County that can be found on the Snohomish STEM Network webpage and also WashingtonSTEM.org. So we're going to dive in here a little bit. Employer programs for early learning and childcare are just a really effective tool to talent acquisition and support for future workforce development, as well as getting people back to work. We have 5 panelists today. First of all, Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self will be joining our panel soon. She works across child serving systems, giving her a deep appreciation and understanding for all human services. She represents the 21st Legislative District since 2013 and is a member of the leadership team serving as the Majority Caucus Vice Chair. We also have Deirdre Whitaker. She's been with We Care Academy since its inception 9 years ago and has been in early childhood education for 15 years, where her background's in early elementary education. We Care Academy is a quality rated nature enhanced license program in Linwood, serving about 70 children per day. And we have Guy Ocragoso, the chamber leader in Whatcom County since 2006, and he's proudly served the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce since 2014. As president and CEO, he advocates for members and serves as a community convener. Karen Madsen is with us she's the Developmental Disabilities and Early Learning Division Manager for Snohomish County Human Services and is a strong partner of the Early Learning Coalition leadership team. And Elaine Larson is our Regional Manager for Opportunity Council Child Care Aware of Northwest Washington. She oversees the work of 26 early learning coaches who support over 700 licensed childcare providers across our 5-county region. Just a small job. Thank you, Elaine. So I'm going to start into some questions for our panelists, and I just encourage you to drop questions in the chat. There are a number of ways this conversation can go, but our panelists are ready to have a robust conversation around this. So let's start with Deirdre. Can you share with us what the operating barriers are that you have and how COVID has impacted operation costs for you?
Absolutely. So a lot of the barriers that we're having right now are specific to COVID. Some of them are the fact that we have a lot of overseeing governing bodies, including DCYF and the Snohomish Health District, that are extremely strict at the moment due to COVID. We have group sizes that have been reduced. So our group sizes are much smaller, means that we are reducing our capacity and the amount of spots that we can fill with the working adults in our area. We have grouping restrictions as well, which means that we need more staff on site at all times. Our classrooms actually need to be open from open to close with enough teachers for every child or to stay in ratio. It's causing a huge staffing issue to cover that spread, which also increases our costs. We have increased cleaning regulations. So think about a childcare center and how many toys you have in every single classroom. Every single toy needs to be cleaned every single day. We are also making sure that children from sniffly noses to fevers are out, which means parents aren't working and they're using more of their vacation credits, which is a pain point for us. We also have increased general costs, just the cost of gloves alone, which we use for sunscreen application, diaper changing, bathroom help for young children. The cost of gloves has at one point quadrupled, but has now settled at about double per case. And that's just one particular item. Toilet paper, those kind of things are all things that have gone up. And with the shortages and the hoarding behaviors that happened, at least specifically in Snohomish County, child cares in the beginning were not offered bulk pricing or the ability to buy in bulk. So there were times where we didn't know if we could operate our center because we wouldn't have toilet paper in the classrooms. We have larger operating barriers, such as the inability to hire at the moment. So with more children looking to come back into centers because parents are looking to go back to work, we have to staff for those children. And at the moment, we just are having a large issue with that. And then an even bigger issue that we face is the state subsidy rates not covering the actual costs of our care per day, which means that if they're only reaching 60 to 70% of our daily costs, we can't hold as many spots for low-income families as we would like to. And then one of the things that was hardest for us in the beginning of COVID was just the reduction in enrollment. Tuition pays 80% of our income goes directly to compensation for staff, from paychecks to benefits for them. And when we lose 60% of our tuition income, we have trouble making sure that even during a pandemic, our employees can maintain their health insurance and things like that. So those would be our biggest barriers for operating on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for sharing that. In our Snohomish County report, in the State of the Children's report, it reflects that the maximum subsidy allowed for at-home childcare is $10,000, where the cost of quality Childcare is 24,000. So just speaking to that gap, it's challenging for sure. Guy, could you touch on why this matters to our business and community? Why should we care? What are some unique approaches that you've seen in your community up north?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. It's so great when we as chambers, business associations can collaborate and come together and kind of chamber R&D, like we say, replicate and duplicate and learn from each other. For me, I really think of the business case for childcare. When I say childcare, I'm speaking, just as Angie was mentioning, a quality childcare. It's a workforce issue. Prior to the pandemic, we had a workforce issue that we were tracking, and it seems like now we're kind of, as we're coming out of it, we're engaging in a very similar lack of workers. And that business case for childcare is really twofold. There's the business case for now, which is simply a numbers game. It's getting people to a place where they can go back to work. And I think that's pretty straightforward. People understand that. But the investment, if you will, is that long-term investment in the workforce of tomorrow, or let's just say really awesome humans for tomorrow. Because again, we need to look, as community organizations and entities, we need to look at productivity as only one part of quality education and being just a good human, right? But specifically from a workforce perspective, one of the things that we were tracking prior to the pandemic is a lack of certain skill sets, a lot of soft skill sets. And those skill sets are really learned by the age of 7. And when we invest in, again, quality childcare, it's really an investment in our future, and one that we can't, or if we can, it's incredibly expensive to remedy down the road. So again, I look at it from a business case of now and about 25 years from now.
Thank you, Guy. As you share that, I'm thinking about a study out of Boston that it was over 15, 20 years that was shared with me that speaks exactly to that, retrospective, but huge number of children that they saw that social soft skill impact for sure. Not seeing any questions in here. I'm waiting for you guys. I know you have them.
Well, and one of the, I'll just kind of ad lib a little bit more is this has been a multi-year process for us in Whatcom County. It really started about 5 years ago with this realization that there was a problem. And I think, again, if we're in Western Washington, even I-5 Western United States, housing's the issue, right? Like housing's the thing that we can't get away from because it's such a pain point in our system. Again, about 5 years ago, in a dialogue with a community member who's front lines engaging in youth development, and he framed it in the form of waves, right? Being a coastal communities, we understand waves. Housing's the wave that's hitting us now. Childcare is the potentially bigger wave that's actually after that we can't see, that we can't focus on. And that conversation led to a partnership with the Opportunity Council and kind of Elaine's colleagues here in Whatcom County to produce a survey. And so we started just tracking it on a business community. And that has led to 2 efforts. One is we call the North County Employer Consortium. And so in North Whatcom County, we have a lot of our bigger employers who are seeing this pain point more readily than, let's say, smaller employers. And then just recently, we formed the Northwest Center for Childcare Retention and Expansion in partnership with the Opportunity Council that's housed in the chamber. And so there are steps that we're doing to better the business environment for childcare businesses, understand the demands and needs of our employers, and try to link those two.
Thank you for sharing. I wonder if this warrants like a whole nother coffee chat in itself. I mean, the work you've done in the last 5 years in partnership with community and people like Elaine, I'm sure.
Step one, find experts. Elaine being an expert.
Okay, we're coming to you soon, Elaine. Get ready. Let's see. Well, let's just go to Elaine. Can you share some information around the importance of brain development between the ages of 0 to 5 and how you support childcare providers and early learning providers in our region?
Sure. First of all, I'm not an expert. I surround myself with really smart people. And like Guy said, the colleagues up north, very smart people. So I'm not an expert. But yeah, we have known for years how important quality early learning is. And finally, the science has caught up to our understanding of it. And a number of years ago, the science is pretty clear that those first 3 years of a child's life and that brain development builds the foundation for their future health, learning, and life success. And a lot of people probably have heard this statistic that by the age of 5, 85% of a child's brain development is done. And so it just really points out the criticalness of those first 5 years. And part of that is the importance of being surrounded by caring adults. And we all know that parents are the child's first teacher. And when a parent can't be there because they need to work, they're surrounded by other adults, other caring adults. It could be family, it could be friends, and it could be an early learning environment, a childcare provider, or some other kind of program. Those relationships and those environments are the building blocks to school success, as you talked about, Angie. And it's so important. And you talked about too, Guy, the soft skills. This is where young children are learning those soft skills early on so that they can enter into school ready to learn. It's not just ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It's how to get along with people. It's how to be in a group of people, how to interact with each other. In a high quality environment, that's what children are learning. And it's so important. Again, I just cannot reiterate the importance of those first 3 and 5 years, because that is where the brain is being developed and has grown. So it's so vitally important. What we do, our group of staff across our 5-county region, is we work with licensed childcare providers to help them increase the quality of care. We talk about interactions, we provide professional development, we do some observations and provide feedback, all with the idea that the licensed childcare provider, the professionals in the field, they're the experts. They know what they need to do. We're there to just support them and provide them resources so that they can do the great job that they're doing.
Thank you so much, Elaine. We're gonna come back to Karen, but I'm gonna just go right over to Deirdre and just ask you about the programs that you're implementing in place with children.
So in regards to the soft skills,
The training you do, what you taught, there's a lot happening. We talked about, So there's kind of different segments to it. And one is what we would call the staff initial training or the professional development for staff. And that's just to get people in the door. And a lot of people just kind of have this idea of childcare employees walking in off the street, being good with kids and having a job with them. When in fact, we're looking at an exorbitant amount of training that goes into new hires, especially if they haven't been in the childcare field before. We have
an initial basic training that is 30 hours. Thankfully with COVID, it's a little bit reduced because normally it's in person. But there are 8 DCYF related trainings to make sure that our staff members are being culturally responsive and also socially responsive to things that are happening in our community, which include families experiencing homelessness, mandated reporter training, medication management for those that need additional supports. And then there's other basic trainings like CPR, first aid, a food handler's permit, which is something that seems silly, but is an additional hour upon their training requirements. And then the background check, which can take 6 weeks. Those are just things to get employees in the door. And then there's an additional 10 hours of training that we do with them through the state in a system called the STARS system. Starting very soon, because the law just changed in 2018, we're also going to be facing a challenge of getting our teachers college educated, which is an important thing, especially for professionalizing the industry and making sure that every child is receiving that quality care. However, most early learning educators make just above minimum wage. And there are some programs that are designed to help through early achievers, which is the quality rating system. However, a lot of times funding can be an issue for that. So we're paying people just above minimum wage and asking them to go back and get college courses, which can be exceedingly expensive. And these are going to be required just for teachers to be alone with children if the lead teacher has to use the restroom or something like that. So every teacher in the building is going to be required to have this college education. That's just to get people in the door. So it does become a kind of a burdensome process, but it's also really impactful for the teachers.
So Deirdre, to your point, in the State of the Children's report, there's a page that speaks exactly to this. The average hourly wage for childcare teachers and preschool teachers is $15 to $17. And this is in our region, by the way. This is specific to our region. Kindergarten teachers with that same college degree make $31, $32 an hour. And the average of all other occupations in the region is about $30 an hour. So there's a parity in pay and equity there. So certainly, thank you for raising that. I guess on the economic side of things, I'm going to shift it over to Karen Matson. Thinking about the family, to what extent, and the capacity that exists in our county, to what extent does capacity and affordability for our families influence their ability to return to work?
Thanks, Angie. I'm trying to think of the best place to focus, because the more you dig into early learning and childcare, you realize really how complicated of a situation it is. So right now, I think the biggest challenge a lot of families are facing is just trying to figure out what fall is going to look like. They may have children that are birth to 5, but they likely also have school-age children. And will they be back full time? Will there be moments when everybody's shut down again? So I honestly do think that is the biggest challenge faced by families. And what we know is that this pandemic has had a very large impact on the mental health of children and families. And I think parents really are trying to do the best they can to stabilize for their children. So I think I caution patience for all of us as parents are really trying to sort out, what is in the best interest for their family financially, as well as in mental health and just well-being for their family. For a lot of our families that we serve through the county operates a state-funded preschool program, ECAP. We have 1,500 slots that we subcontract out with school districts and nonprofits. Edmonds Community College also has Head Start and ECAP. probably collectively, we serve somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 2,500 families at 110% federal poverty level, which is very low income. There are at least as many families eligible for services as we are currently serving. So I say that because we want to be sure to not leave children and families behind, because they are the workers for tomorrow. So we need to think about how do we invest in those programs that serve our families that are furthest from opportunity. That funding does not financial model out to provide services. It's much like licensed childcare. The profit margin for licensed childcare is itty bitty, if even that. And it's true in Head Start and ECAP funding as well. In fact, those programs all have to put additional money into it. And that is one of the biggest struggles right now with that. I think for families, what I am seeing is as they've had the chance to be at home, whether that's been a good thing or not, the silver lining is they realize that they truly are their child's best educator, and that they have become reinvested in their child's future and education. And I just say that because as employers, I think we really have to think about the parents that we're employing and think about how we provide opportunities for them as they return back to work to stay engaged with their children and to support their children. And there's, I think, what we know for the next couple of years, children are going to need some extra support. There's going to be some behavioral health issues for children, and parents are going to need an opportunity to step out occasionally from work to support their children. And we're always going to have parents with children with special needs, so we need to think about that. As a business community, you have the opportunity to connect families with resources. You can build relationships with your local childcare providers within your area that you work to see if you can't build alliances with them. You can connect families if they're eligible to Working Connections Childcare, which is a subsidy that helps pay for childcare. We hope, it might be premature in saying this, but we're hoping that some of the funding that we're getting in related to the American Recovery Plan will allow us to support some childcare for parents who are looking for work, because you often cannot get subsidy for childcare when until you have a job, and that's a challenge. I can't emphasize enough that the family piece is critical to that early learning. So you'll also have an opportunity, I hope, in the next few years to invest in initiatives in community that support families to just learn with their children. So I'm going to put a plug for STEM because I think it's so critical. And what all the research said is the biggest bang for your buck, if you want to see an increase in outcomes for children in math and science, is to bring the parents on board and get them excited about math and science and think about how they can help their children engage in math and science at home. And so you're going to see some new initiatives in the community that are about that. And I encourage you to support those initiatives because they will give you children in the future who can be critical thinkers and be creative and at the same time have the skills to communicate with each other.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm excited maybe at another point in this conversation to share a couple of things the STEM network has done and my colleagues around the state and other STEM networks have done to support multi-generational community-based learning opportunities that are just fun. They're things that happen in place and time where people naturally go. I also want to just kind of anchor this conversation with the fact relative to affordability. Department of Commerce states that childcare should cost no more than 7% of our income for a family of four, which means that we would need to make $380,000 for that to happen. So that just like puts it in perspective. That's the goal, but just we're out of balance clearly. And Arun, it's not gone missed by me. I saw your question around nonprofits and some funding focused on development of curriculum for early learning centers. And with that question in mind, I'm delighted to welcome Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self. Thank you for joining us today. We already gave a brief introduction And we've been talking about how business can support parents returning to work in an uncertain time as we return back K-12, to the classroom. But then around early learning, how we've lost some capacity, hopefully that be it temporarily, as we provide support for our young ones. So I guess we wanted to give you the floor and just hear about what's happened around childcare and early learning this legislative session and how you predict, I know through a number of ways, there are funds that will support our community and families, but I'm curious how you predict these funds will be leveraged.
Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to be with you. And thank you for your flexibility with my crazy schedule to be able to be here this morning. We were really excited that we got passed this year the Fair Start Act. It is the act to make sure that 0 to 6 gets addressed as far as early learning, childcare facilities. I will say it's a drop in the bucket when you think of the big picture, but it's a substantial drop. It was a good foundation. We continue to put in chunks of dollars to make movement. And we knew that this chunk had to be a little bit bigger than we have in the past because of the pandemic, and we lost daycare centers and childcare facilities. I would also say that we would have never gotten this passed if it wasn't for our business community. Our business community came out in full force in support of this because of the impact it was having. They knew all the people that had to drop out of the workforce when this happened, when daycare centers started closing, etc. We have statistics on how we lost so many women out of the workforce. A big chunk of that was over daycare facility and access to quality daycare for their children. And we haven't regained anywhere near where we thought we would in that workforce. So we know that women were hit very hard. And ultimately what happens is that our workforce is hit very hard, and then our businesses are hit very hard. So we knew off the bat that if our priority was going to be rebuilding our economy, that childcare had to be a focus, and getting our schools open had to be a focus in order that our workforce could get back to work. So this substitute Senate Bill 5237 is our Fair Start Act. I can't go through all the details because I'm afraid I'll get something wrong, but I will speak generally about what some of the focus was on the bill. It came through our early learning committee, and I was very proud to vote for that. So it does a couple things. One, it raises the eligibility level for families. So in many cases, it raised it to 200% of the federal poverty level versus 100 and 130. Some of these programs had a 100% or 130% poverty level. It raised it up to 200% poverty level. Again, I just heard some statistics about how much you should be paying out of your income for childcare. We're not there, but significantly take another step towards that. So I would encourage everyone to look at, for every little program, I tell everybody in the communities, you need to relook at the eligibility requirements because they have changed in ECAP and Working Connections Childcare, some early learning requirements. Those the Birth to 3 program, a lot of them have changed their requirements. And have extended requirements to 36 months if it was 24 months, or it has your eligibility. The other thing that it does is to help with the education and training of our workers, our workforce. So that's a critical part of that as well, is making sure that we have a trained workforce to deal with the multiple needs of our children. So just like in our K-12 system, we can't assume that every child is the same and that every child's needs are the same. And so one of the things, for example, we were having is that we had some children that may have had some social emotional issues And so they might bite another child, or they might whatever. And some childcare facilities were not equipped to deal with that. And so they would remove the child. And when we were looking at the research, we saw that this child had 6 different places. We are already expelling kids out of our system. And so what do we need to do different around training, around services provided at an early age, so that there's stability for the child, so that when they enter into kindergarten and first grade, the stability is there and we're not repeating that pattern. Things like that. And some funding for that training. And that was important. We also wanted to increase and help fund our in-home providers. Oftentimes they're our most diverse group of providers. Those that parents might feel really comfortable learning dual language, children that speak different languages. And so helping to provide and get the training into the community so that it makes it easier and in their language, so that they can also attend and there's not a barrier there. We also increased the salaries for our providers that get state contracts. Again, I just have to say a disclaimer, not as much as they deserve, but there was an increase in salaries. And we put in grant dollars for small businesses to be able to help keep them going. Those are some of the highlights. We also, I wanted to mention, we also, if a parent was going to school, going to the community college and going to school, helping them to qualify for the programs, as opposed to saying, you have to go find a job, because we know that 2-year investment is going to make a difference in this family's life. So we started to open opportunities like that. That was one that we heard from the business community a lot, because it helps to meet a specific need or training need for our communities. We did some partnerships with our tribal members. I'm trying to, we increased ECAP slots. That was another big need. We were able to do that. And again, continuing to provide support for our providers through trainings, technical assistance, etc. So those are some of the highlights of the bill. I'm not doing it justice because there's so much more, but I don't want to take up all of your time either. But I'm willing to answer any questions if there's anything that I can do to answer that. But just want to say again that our business community made this happen by saying this is such a big need and we need our workers to be able to get back to work. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for your work on this bill. Sorry about, there's some feedback here. My apologies. We also have Soleil Boyd from Washington STEM with us in the room. So if any of you have further questions on this bill, Washington STEM were strong partners in bringing this to fruition this session. So I guess back to maybe our panelists, do you have any questions around what Representative Ortiz Self shared and how that impacts the work you're doing to support access to opportunity for families in early learning? And you can just jump in, it's okay. Don't need to raise your hand.
So I want to say thank you first, because it really was an incredible bill. And I also appreciate understanding that it's not enough. And I think we really have to look at, sadly, how far behind Washington State is in early learning in terms of our investment, and that it feels, I think, very financially daunting to folks to think about investing in this. But I also really appreciate what Guy said is it's not a huge investment when you think about what it's going to mean to our state and to our communities and our economy in the next 15 to 18 years. And those parents are also working in those industries. So when we strengthen those parents, their children will also grow up to be strong community members. So I just, and again, I think it's very complex, but when we invest in that birth to 5, when 85% of your brain development is happening, we're going to pay less than we're paying now in the rest of the system for the rest of the lives of these children and families. So,
Absolutely. And I also want to say that, and I forgot to mention this, that for the first time, and this may or may not be controversial for some, but for the very first time, we have attached a funding source to early childhood and care. And that is the capital tax will be directed to fund these programs and continue to increase the funding for these programs. And that's the first time that's ever been done. And so, you know, we have funding sources for all sorts of transportation projects. We have funding sources for like our roads, and we have funding for K-12 system tied in. We don't have anything to provide childcare and early learning. And so the capital tax dollars are directed for early learning and childcare, which will help provide a steady income so that every year we at least know a ballpark of what we can count on, instead of trying to scramble every year, trying to find how do we come up with the dollars for this. So I think that was a very big step that was accomplished this year.
So kind of a follow-up question to this. I believe just before you came on, we were talking a little bit about the parity in wage for early learning providers as compared to, like, say, a kindergarten teacher. It's essentially half of the pay. So Wes Allen has a question around what needs to be done to increase the pay to a livable wage to attract these valuable skills in providing early learning for our community. Any thoughts on that?
This was a big step on that as far as a funding source. We need to evaluate and see how that funding source compares and what else do we need to do to attach more dollars to it. But we have to have a steady income. You know, for example, our K-12 system, 60% of our budget is allocated to K-12, and we can't touch that. It is by law. It's a mandate. It's in our Constitution. And so we have 60% of our budget that goes into K-12 system. So we at least know, and we know that that's not enough. We have all these other things that we do to help supplement the needs of our communities. But we at least know there's this foundational amount of dollars that we can continue to fund. And that's where we need to get to with our early learning, is to have this pot. And I think this capital tax is definitely a step in the right direction, but we have to evaluate. And then the other piece of that is our requirements, right? We want our early learning and childcare providers to have that bachelor's degree that our K-12 system has, because these are the brain research shows how important that is, to really know what you're doing with 0 to 6-year-olds really make a difference. But it's hard for us to require that of them when their pay is so low. So it's like the chicken and the egg, you know, which comes first? You know, nobody wants to fund them at a kindergarten teacher with that when they have, 30 credits, right? At the same time, we can't say, go get your bachelor's degree, and in the meantime, you're getting paid half the amount of money. So it's kind of starting to, that's what we're trying to do, is infuse in some extra training requirements, try to help boost and have incentives for those extra trainings. Try to increase pay as those trainings are completed, start to build a funding source that we can continue to build on, and then together keep moving those up, because that is exactly where we need to go.
Angie, can I pop in for a second?
Sure thing.
Thanks. First, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the work that we are seeing towards extended funding, and just kind of these continued sources of funding are super important for us, especially from someone who would be considered boots on the ground. I get to kind of see it in the operational costs. Something to just put it a little bit into perspective for people who don't work in childcare is that we were very fortunate over the pandemic to receive additional COVID funds over the past year from the state. We got awarded 3 amounts of $6,500 a piece, which was phenomenal. We were so grateful and thankful, but when broken down, kind of comes to about 4 days worth of payroll for us as a nonprofit. And also something to consider is that Our infant program, while small, we only have 4 infants and 1 teacher, is what we would consider a break-even program. We don't make any money towards the business in that program. However, just to break even, our full-time rates are just under $2,000 a month. And so there's definitely kind of a divide happening between there. So the continued funding sources are they're a huge kind of step for us in the right direction. Also, something that we see in childcares on a daily basis is we work hard to put our teachers through bachelor's degrees or associate's degrees and then bachelor's degrees and give them as high of a paycheck as we absolutely can, and then we lose them to the K-12 system. So we've spent years cultivating these wonderful early educators and then lose them to the bigger paychecks, which who wouldn't? But we want to incentivize them to stay and continue the work that is so important. So,
Absolutely. And until we can offer that big paycheck to the workers, that problem's going to continue, right?
yes.
Especially as it relates to the cost of living continuing to increase, like that gap. So
And I'm just going to add in, it's not just the paycheck, but it is also the benefits. We kind of underestimate that, but benefits are very expensive if you're a nonprofit, and as business owners, you all know that, and the retirement piece. So I think, again, these are often women who are raising families, and they have to think about their hearts, I think, are in early learning, and they have to think about what is the most financial best decision for their families moving forward. So I see a couple of questions about what businesses can do, and I think it really is kind of collectively, how do businesses with all aspects of the community say, this birth to 5 piece matters, and we're going to figure out a way to fund and invest in this and make sure that we have employees and leaders similar to what we have in the K-12 system to make our community strong in early learning. And it really is cross-sector. I will just say really quickly, I was down in Olympia a couple of years ago, and I forget which community it was, but there was the sheriff, there was the community college, there was the Chamber of Commerce, there was early learning, there was this and that, and they were all standing up together and saying, we all have a piece in this, we all benefit from it, and we're all investing in it as a community. And my goal is to walk down the street in Snohomish County and ask somebody about early learning, and they can actually say, yep, this is why it's important, and I invest in this, and I invest in families in our community and the future workforce.
Thank you, Karen. Can I just ask you a question here?
sure thing.
Yeah. My name is Arun Sharma. I have been in Boeing for a long time, 30 years, still working there, and a faculty at UW School of Business. And me and a few partners are starting early learning center, and that's very good that we're all starting to call it not a daycare but an early learning, because that's where the key is, where that shift needs to happen. Because I was talking to Angie the other day, the kids who are in these early learning centers now probably will never need a driver's license. Their vacations would be on moon and stuff like that. So the world is changing on them, and they need to be very science and STEM oriented, because they need to be working with machines, but they need to stay humans. Otherwise, we'll have a society of robots, not a happy community, right? So we're trying to open a center, but it's like we are on our own. There's not enough help from DCU. I have to say, once you have the occupancy certificate, come to us, and then we'll start the process for you. In the meantime, you're on your own. COVID, there's a sourcing, supply chain issues, and things getting delayed, and either we continue to spend our own money and sustain, or go to another business where we can make a lot more money than, as you said, the margin is so small. and our partners, we're all in corporations, and we could probably make more money in other places than here. And it's only our passions that are keeping us here. So one thing that I heard a lot from the state and the county team members here, but haven't heard anything from the businesses here, right? We keep hearing that the brain development happens early on, but has the businesses acknowledged that? Have do they agree that this is where their focus needs to be on, right? So it looked like this conversation was mostly centered on how the state and how the county and what the regulation will happen, but not on how a public-private partnership will take us forward. So I would like to hear that.
So Arun, thank you so much for your vision. This conversation was intended to sort of seed that, to help orient our community to what exists, and then seed for further, future conversation, ongoing conversation. I see here that Soleil from Washington STEM shared a variety of ways business can support employees to access quality childcare, which I was going to thank you for doing that, because we're running short on time. I was going to go to Guy with that one. These are some things he shared with us that they've implemented up in Whatcom. I've heard this anecdotally from a number of businesses and sectors that are really struggling to attract talent, but we forget, there are things such as FSA accounts that support childcare access, things that you're doing as employers that attract talent. Put them out there in the application process so they can see what you're offering them. It is that they've said it's a way to have an edge up on our competition. So with that said, I would like to just give a quick go around, just any final thoughts, short final thoughts from each of our panelists before we wrap up here. Representative Ortiz-Self, I'd like to give you the floor first.
I just want to thank everyone for their support and passion around this issue. I will say that it was as encouraging as this was to be able to get this piece of legislation off the floor. It was also equally heartbreaking to see how many people had to come and advocate for it and how many people opposed it because they just don't see the need or the dollars, and they see early learning as a mom and pop daycare facility that doesn't need, that they want to keep as simple as possible. They want their neighbor to watch their child kind of thing. And they had that mentality, and they kept saying, in my day, our neighbor just watched us, without fully understanding that picture. And that it takes so many people invested to keep this issue at the forefront. That part is heartbreaking because the research is there. Other countries are doing it. The investment pays off, and we are so behind in that issue. And at the same time, very encouraging that like Karen said, we had people from all over, from law enforcement to businesses to colleges, all saying the same thing. This will make a difference in our kids' lives and in our communities' lives. And if you don't want to do it because it's the right thing to do, then we need to do it because it's the economically wise thing to do, because we as a community will do better economically if we provide the appropriate childcare for our children.
Thank you so much and for being with us today. Elaine.
Thank you so much.
Elaine.
Well, there's so many great things that have been said. I just want to reiterate that, that high quality early learning is a 2-generational workforce issue. It impacts the workforce today, and it impacts the workforce down the road in so many ways. And it's those soft skills. And I love that the idea of just building better humans, this is where it can happen.
Thank you, Elaine. Guy, going with better humans. That was quoted by you.
Now, words coming out. That's what I get. I'm from the South, and I'm Italian and Cajun, and a whole bunch words come out. So I was really interested in some of the dialogue in the chat. I posted 2 links that share our partnership with the Opportunity Council Arun mentioned, what can the business community do? A lot. I think there's important bigger picture pieces here. As we mentioned, raise good humans. We can invest in early childhood education. I like 0 to 7 because there are 2 metrics that we as the business community are starting to pay attention to. Number 1, kindergarten readiness. Number 2, 4th grade language arts reading. If we can get those 2 metrics as close to 100% as we can, we start solving a lot of other really expensive issues, criminal justice issues, homelessness issues, because that's not impacting the Puget Sound area at all. So think of it as that investment piece, really moving money. I saw somewhere else on the chat, what about, let's say that more traditional K through 12. I think of it like as quicksand, right? Like, why would you place someone in quicksand and wait 7 years to throw them a lifeline, right? I'd rather build a decent foundation so they're self-sustaining a little bit, and then you can kind of pull them up in other ways that allow a greater flexibility and innovation. And that's what the Puget Sound should be known for. I think it's what we have been known for, whether you consider Boeing or Microsoft or everything in between. Right? We can solve this, and we can be leaders in the nation in how we do so. There was also a question, rural versus urban. Whatcom County is often considered a very rural community. Bellingham's clearly a little bit different. Elaine, you might have to help me if you know our numbers. Our best guess prior to the pandemic is we were 1,600 spots short.
If not more, yeah.
If not more, right? At least 1,500 spots short. This is not an urban versus rural. This is a childcare and youth commitment dilemma. So I don't want to talk more than that. There's probably plenty to say. I guess one other piece, going back to that innovation, what a business can do, benefits look very different among businesses, right? Speaking to Snohomish County, Everett, Boeing is kind of a major player. When you look at employers all around the nation, especially for airlines, you have employers guaranteeing slots in airlines. Why can't we do that for childcare through HR departments? That is one innovative way to look at childcare slot as a benefit. You want to keep an employee, guarantee them guarantee having a childcare spot. One option. I saw the list, which was a really comprehensive, great list. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Guy. We so appreciate you sharing your perspective and all you've been working on as kind of light for us to look towards building this capacity in our region. We are certainly over time. Deirdre, Karen, 30 seconds, any final thoughts? And I'm going to hand it off to Gary to wrap things up.
I will be short and sweet, but speaking for myself and a lot of other directors in the South Snohomish area, we are ready to advocate for our employees and our children in our community. And we're ready to get on board and create these sustained funding sources and do other things that will help promote the understanding of the importance of early childhood education, as well as the importance of having enough spaces available so that parents can contribute to the economy in our area. So we want these partnerships with local businesses and local community members, and we're ready to help however we can.
Thank you, Deirdre, so much. Karen.
My final word is parents come with children and children come with parents. We need to stop separating them apart. We need to really move forward with a whole family approach and really be family driven in both how we do business and how we do early learning.
Thank you for your vision, Karen. So appreciated. Gary, I'm handing it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. This has been a robust conversation. I think We've learned a lot today. Angie, thanks for your leadership, and all of the panelists. I really appreciate your expertise and knowledge leading to this conversation. Obviously, we need to have another one of these to expand on this because there's more to say. That said, we are wrapping this up with just a few updates. Number one, we have our annual meeting June 10th from 8:30 to 9:30, Resilient Together. You don't want to miss it if you haven't signed up already. And then last but not least, I am aware that the United Nations calls this a human right, which is having adequate housing. So our next coffee chat will be a conversation about housing on June 15th at 8:30 a.m. So folks, rise up your coffee cups, have an amazing day, do it on purpose, intentional, make an impact. Thank you all from Economic Alliance, Snohomish County. Take care.